What's your name?
Okay, is it on now?
Yep.
Okay. Bill Mater,
Mater. And what's your date of birth?
July 31st, 1952, in California.
And do you know that you're being video recorded?
I do.
Okay. Where were you born?
San Jose, California.
And is that where you were raised?
I was raised there until the first year of high school. Then my dad, who worked for Coca-Cola, was transferred, actually accepted another position with Canteen Corporation in Tucson, Arizona.
So then you moved to Tucson?
Moved to Tucson, grew up on the edge of Tucson, and got extremely interested in wildlife there, and I started college there and everything.
So you got involved with the birds, that sort of thing down there?
Right, I ended up studying birds of prey, specifically the first population ecology studies of a very unique hawk called Harris hawk. They hunt cooperatively and they practice polyandry where they have two males in a single nest with a female. And so I did that and then published the results, but during that interim I also became a college dropout. I dropped out of college for 2 years with probably a C- average. Left, marked timber for the Forest Service, Northern California. Then worked on a Puerto Rican parrot project in the rainforest of Puerto Rico. Made enough money there, then with a backpack went to South America and spent some time there. Came back, and then I was a motivated student after being gone for a year, and my grades did better.
You went back to Arizona?
Went back to the U of A, got a bachelor's degree in wildlife biology, and then my publications were published at Cornell and Science Papers, and then I got accepted into a PhD program at BYU, although I was not born.
And so how long was that program up there?
It took me about 3.5 years to get through the PhD program.
In wildlife biology?
It was in zoology. I had 2 grants. I had one from, 2 from National Geographic, 2 from American Museum of Natural History. And then I ended up, I'd always wanted, since I was a little kid, probably because I saw too many Tarzan movies, was to go into the neotropics, the New World tropics, and study birds of prey. So I got lucky. I found a place that might work. And it was the first population ecology study of any raptor in Central or South America. Nobody had done it because it's so extraordinarily difficult. The terrain and the living conditions were physically sapping. But anyway, it turned out to be very successful. I got my PhD, published results. I went into, ended up working for a number of corporations over the years, American Express, Citicorp, Lockheed. Ran a wildlife reserve in Utah for a while, then retired. Then worked briefly for several years for Ted Turner's organization. And then really retired. And then then I was offered this job to teach environmental science to the Navajo Nation. I work for the Navajo Nation now, and I teach environmental science at their college here in northern New Mexico.
Well, back when you went down to Central and South America, working on your PhD, you said it was very trying, very sapping. What exactly did you do? What were the physical requirements?
Oh, I lived on a very remote ranch in a very poor area, and there were other scientists there, some were from the Smithsonian, but it was a very rough working cattle ranch. The cattle were a cross between Brahma and Longhorn, for example. Occasionally they got aggressive. But it was a place to paint a picture. There were anacondas, capybaras, these big giant rodents, monkeys everywhere, crocodiles everywhere, giant anteaters.
Where was this?
It was what they called Los Llanos in Venezuela. And big broad savannas, rivers, gallery forests along the rivers, multiple species of cats, jaguar and lions, ocelots and things like that. And so I ended up being there 15 months to complete the study. And it was a great time. It was an absolutely wonderful time. The cowboys there are called llaneros, and they're some of the hardest, toughest people you'll ever meet. But they're very modest, quiet guys. They ride horses down there barefoot. They grab the stirrup between their big toe and the second toe. And that's how they live down there.
So were you down there before or after you became a smoke jumper?
I was there after I became a smoke jumper, so I got trained in Missoula at but then Boise, Idaho needed jumpers. So although I got trained in 75 in Missoula, I immediately went to Boise because I had a friend there, John Smith. And then jumped there for a season, came back, and then I was in graduate school. And then got on the Alaskan crew because someone had to drop out, so I ended up jumping the next 2 years in Alaska, which was one of the most memorable experiences I've ever had.
So do you remember when you, you had fire experience before you showed up in Missoula?
Right, I had 3 summers fire experience, 2 in hell attack.
And where was that at?
The hell attack stuff was based out of Tucson in the Coronado National Forest in a helicopter Huey. And we flew all over the West. And then before that, when I marked timber, I went on the occasional fires. And I quickly figured out that the money was not in marking timber, it was in fire. And it was more exciting anyway, so that's where I went.
And your other years before smoke jumping, were they all in the Coronado, or?
When we were on hell attack on the Coronado, we went everywhere. We went to New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, Idaho. I think we were on the California. Yeah, we did go to California on standby at Redding, where I later was on standby jumping a few years later. So it was kind of all over. It was very interesting.
So then you went from the hell attack to the jumper training in Missoula.
That's right.
And what do you remember about the training in Missoula? And what year was that?
That was in '75. I remember meeting some very good people there. I remember it was very rigorous. I was in great shape, and I remember damaging my knee, not during the training, but during the overnight when they want you to build fire line all night, and I just twisted it. So I realized that to get through the training, I was going to have to kind of ruin my left knee. So I got to the training. I don't limp or anything like that, but I can still feel the consequences of making that choice. But I never got hurt jumping.
Yeah. Do you remember your first parachute jump?
Yeah, I remember. It was a big open field, lots of peer pressure, absolutely no bravery involved. A lot of peer pressure. I had people in front of me, like there were people behind me. There was nothing else to do but leave the airplane.
And did you have any problems during your practice jumps, your training jumps?
No, they all went pretty smooth. I do remember a mistake. They would train us for water jumps in case you hit a lake. And I was kind of naive then, like I guess most young people. We were going to make a water jump outside of Missoula in one of these lakes. And so I hit the lake pretty much dead center. And I remember it was cold, dark, and darker, is how I remember. Well, then I figured out all these guys were missing the lake, and they were missing the lake because they were smarter than I was. Then they get another jump because they missed the lake, where I was too naive to figure that out first.
Do you have any problems with that water jump?
No, it gave me a lot of respect about landing in water. After that, I have to say the idea of hitting a river or a lake would be a really unpleasant experience. I never did that during a fire jump.
What was your first fire jump?
First fire jump, the interesting story is when I left Missoula in '75. Right after the training, I flew down to Boise, and within, 4 or 5 days, I jumped a fire. And I think I jumped 5 that summer out of Boise. And a lot of the new guys in Missoula didn't even get a fire jump that year because it was just a slow year, so it's really a lucky opportunity for me.
So then you went from there back to grad school?
Yeah, after I finished jumping, I went to grad school full time.
And then back to Missoula?
Never went back to Missoula. I was always stationed out in Boise, and then on Boise I got on the, what they call the down south jump crew, where they combined Redding, McCall, and Boise. Then we went up to Alaska. So I was in Alaska 76, 77.
And then was that out of Fairbanks, or where'd you jump out of?
Jumped out of Fairbanks, but we have these satellite bases everybody remembers now. They're part of history, like McGrath and Galena.
Yeah.
And I probably remember Galena the most. I remember coming back from a patrol, and we were flying Volpars back then. There were 8 guys. And I remember the plane crashing on landing.
I saw that plane. I remember it with the wing turned back.
Yeah, it was totally...
Walt Curry was on that plane from Missoula. Yeah.
Yeah. And Clay Morgan was on it.
I don't remember that, but I remember seeing it below us. We came back and it was down there.
Yeah, and for some reason, and I later became a pilot, I can understand it now, I guess, but his right turbine failed or reversed or something, so we went off through the tundra and destroyed the aircraft. And it later caught on fire, but nobody was really keen about getting into it. But the funny part of the story is that the tower was right there at Galena, and that big tower for controlling F-4 Phantoms taking off. And the tower didn't notice that we had crashed. And then the left wing root started burning because the pilot had applied the brakes and everything. And it wasn't his fault. And so they didn't realize this plane had crashed and it was starting to burn, you know, right off the runway. It may have been their coffee break or something. So finally, someone goes into the plane and gets one of the handheld radios, calls the tower and said, you know, we got this problem with the airplane. So then they dispatched one of those huge, gigantic fire trucks, you know, with the water cannons on them. And you can see it coming down the runway. And the plane's, you know, starting to smoke, and the gear's punched up through the wing, and it's totally wiped out. And so the fire truck's coming down as fast as it can down the runway. And then it stops, and it stops because the hose had unrolled accidentally. So they were dragging the hose down the runway. And so they had to stop to roll up the hose again. And then the plane's burning a little bit more, not real bad, but enough, you know, you worry about fuel blowing up or something. We all start stepping back, and then one of the guys said, he just went in and got the fire extinguisher on the airplane and just put the fire out. And by the time the fire truck got there, there wasn't a fire, it was okay.
Would you remember what that was like inside?